Oh, it's just riddled. It is riddled with misogyny and cyberbullying and very condescending, very demeaning responses that I get no matter how I approach the topic.
Mhm.
I can
Welcome to the Safe
thank
Space
you, thank you.
podcast. I'm your host, Sydney Rosant, and I have a friend of the podcast with us, Korey. He's a recurring guest, and I have two new guests with us. So if you guys could introduce yourselves.
Hey, cool kids. My name is Jamila. I am Sunny Dae Jones wherever I would like to be found on the internet. I am TJ to my friends, but I am Sunny Day to you. That or Jamila will do just fine. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. And Pierre.
King Pierre in the building.
Hi, everybody. My name is Pierre Fleury. This is Pierre Fleury. I am an educator for a domestic violence center. I also make content around relationships, particularly around dating and domestic violence, as well as just misogyny, patriarchy, and things of that nature. So happy to have myself on. I guess happy to be here. Is that what you said? I don't know.
Happy to have you, Pierre.
Yeah.
So to start off this conversation, this all happened because me and Korey were planning on filming and talking about gender wars. And then on Saturday, I actually sent him a tweet of yours, Pierre. And it's the one where you said, the majority of these men are engaging in sex tourism, and they've been advocating for specifically Black men to leave the US to find wives, and they're not going to Europe or Canada or anywhere with strict laws on human trafficking. They're going to developing countries. So I sent that to Korey just as like a potential talking point for our podcast episode. And he was like, hold on, like I can reach out to Pierre. And then, we started the whole group chat and everything. So I just wanted to provide context for how this conversation even came to be and thank Korey for, facilitating all of this as well. But speaking specifically about the passport bros, for all of us, like when was the first time that you guys discovered this phenomenon, specifically among Black men? Either one of you can start, TJ or Pierre.
Uh, I guess I can go first because it was my tweet.
Mm-hmm.
I was seeing like people make videos, like hinting at them, but I didn't know what it was really. I
Mm-hmm.
just people say like, "Oh, these guys are weird," or "These guys are like are strange," or but I didn't know what it was about. But like, so I didn't really like I never did any research on it. Because all this new trend on TikTok that's very weird. So I just thought it was one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And then I saw another video where this guy was saying that if you all aren't acting accordingly, you all speaking about Black women,
Mm-hmm.
then I'll just go south of the border and I'll find somebody who's younger than you, who's gonna listen to me, and who needs to come here anyways.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like I was like, what? This is a very weird thing to look for in like a dating relationship. So then like I clicked on his profile and he has other videos about like basically saying how like we're looking for like submissive wives, and like US women aren't giving us submissive wives or whatever it is. So like why would I stay here when I can just find somebody else? So like if I think the end of the video I was saying like if you're a man and you're having trouble dating, get your passport and get out of here. Like these women in the US, like they're just not it anymore. And I'm like, is this what's going on? Like then it sounds like you're just leaving your countries to go to other countries to find wives, which on the surface would it seem like it's a big deal. But then again, like a tweet said, like most of their places they're going to is like DR, Cambodia, Thailand, again south of the border, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Mexico, Guatemala, Colombia. And I'm like, how come nobody's going? Again, you get a passport, right? You can go to
Mm-hmm.
Europe, you can go to Canada, you can go to like anywhere else. But it's these specific countries, and if you look at the statistics, those places are high for human trafficking as well as child trafficking. And so they clicked for me. You guys are looking for younger women and places where child trafficking is very common.
Mm-hmm.
and like where it's harder to basically get caught for it because it's one of those against the developing country. The police there aren't really as active about it as it would be in the U.S. or anywhere like that's more developed.
Mm-hmm.
So I just put two together, and also domestic violence counts human trafficking as domestic violence. The definition
Yeah.
of human trafficking will fall into that. So my
Mm-hmm.
organization, we serve people who are victims of human trafficking because a lot of times it's their boyfriends or their husbands who's forcing them into the life of sex work.
Mm-hmm.
But particularly, it's that, especially like in my area, in Florida, being we're near the water and things like that. There are a lot of women that come to our services who are not from the country. Like they don't have an address. They've been homeless. They've been like kind of hopping around from house to house or whatever it is, because it was men. Sometimes it will be men that are from the same culture. Like let's say from Guatemala, like they're from here, but they went over there to bring them here. But sometimes it'll be men from the U.S. that are like either born and raised in the U.S., like black men or American men, who will go to a country, bring them here under the guise of I'll take care of you. You don't have to worry about whatever you're worrying about anymore. X Y Z, and then the women they become victims of abuse. Where the man starts being abusive, starts being controlling, whether it be financially, physically, or sexually. So then they're trying to flee, but they can't go anywhere because, again, they're not from here. They don't speak the language that well. They don't know if they even can ask for services. But sometimes they end up in our services because we work throughout the whole community.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same pattern of my husband brought me here, my boyfriend brought me here, and now I'm homeless. I need somewhere to go, whatever. So now we have to figure out how to get them funds to either bring them back to the country or getting the funds to, eventually like basically live here full time because they can go back or whatever it might be. And I'm just like, that's why whenever I see them advocating for that kind of stuff, I'm like, you guys are literally promoting not just human trafficking, but promoting like domestic violence. Like the
Mm-hmm.
pattern is just there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's been my visual of the Passport Boys since I've heard about them.
I'm really glad that you made that tweet and that you were willing to kind of like facilitate that sort of conversation, because I think that like for the rest of people who are like normal, when you look at the Passport Bros, the first thing you want to do is laugh or be like, oh my gosh, like they can't find anybody here. Like, and you look at them as like, oh, they're dusties, whatever, without connecting the dots of what they're actually doing and what they're actually like engaging in, and that there are victims. Like there's a reason why everybody here was scared of them. Now they're going somewhere else where the people are even more vulnerable, and they are intentionally targeting the most vulnerable people. Because like when you said in the tweet, they're not going to Europe and they're not going to Canada, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I was like, he's right. And I didn't even like think about it. I just was looking at them as like, oh, let the pathetic man go away. But it's like when they go somewhere else, they go somewhere else to cause chaos. But for you, Sunny, when was the first time you kind of discovered the Passport Bros?
I first discovered the Passport Bros in a very similar way on social media. I saw a viral video and I'm just like, what are all these bald headed men doing holding up passports? And at first I thought um it was part of a better intended movement of Black people and traveling in general. And I think a lot of people, when they first hear about Passport Bros, their immediate reaction is Black men are just traveling. Why are you trying to make that a bad thing?
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's clear when you really analyze these videos as a whole and grab common themes out of these videos, you start to understand that this is more of a serious situation than just laughing at men who can't get women their own age, and who are deciding to go quote unquote out of the country. That
Mm-hmm.
was my first that was my first encounter with this specific type of manosphere man. But I realized that maybe this is just the first time that I am hearing it called Passport Bros.
Mm-hmm.
But this is very embedded within the culture of toxic masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
The threat of taking our dominance, taking our good qualities elsewhere because Black women won't be submissive and appreciate them.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think it's really important throughout this entire conversation that we recognize the horrific stereotypes that are placed on these different countries,
Mm-hmm.
stereotypes being primarily what these men are basing their decisions off of. So I saw a man who particularly bragged about going to countries in Asia because those women need help getting to the United States, or those women or Asian women are more submissive. And even in the type of comments that I would get after highlighting the passport bros, it was very clear that we also have some stereotypes of other countries, particularly of countries populated by people of color, that we
Mhm.
really need to work on, because I do want to raise awareness of what's going on with passport bros, but I also don't want to do it in a way that elevates stereotypes. I'm not going to
Mhm.
say, for example, I will not be saying these men are going to third world countries because that's where the submissive women and the child prostitutes are. No. Like,
Mhm.
we're also not going to be doing that either,
Right.
because we're feeding into stereotypes with another stereotype, and that's what keeps people being miseducated about what's actually going on. Because
Mhm.
what's actually going on is that these men are using their stereotypes and their masculinity and their stereotypes about who's more accepting of a toxic, more violent masculinity in order to drive their decisions about traveling elsewhere to find partners. And I want to make sure that we, in this conversation, that we be really careful of that as well.
Mhm. For
So
sure.
that was an entire word, Jamila. Whew, what an analysis. I actually found out about the Passport Bros by being on Sunny Day Jones's page. Like, there was a post about 2 weeks ago, 2.5 weeks ago maybe, where TJ said, you made a post, you were laughing about these men who were, again, like you said, bald headed, holding up their passports. And my first response was like, what is she talking about? Like, I commented that. She was just like, go look at something, something. Well, one of her followers said, go look at something, something. Because I think the guy's name is like the well traveled to something else, right? And we all know that that's the guy that like put a rag over his head and use like a lipstick filter to portray a black woman and say, black women are mad that the passport bros are leaving the country to find, in their mind, more submissive or um, better partners than black women. And I made a couple of posts. Again, my most recent one about it sort of took off a little bit. But when I started telling these men, like, yo, like, why do y'all want to be engaged in sex tourism? Why do you all want to prey on these uh, girls and young women in these nations where, like, you don't speak the language, they don't speak the language, and your most valuable asset to them would be that American passport? Their response was, um, well, white men do it all the time. So why are we getting so much flack for it? And then I saw Pierre also tweet something that stuck with me, is that so sex tourism is not new. Like, I want to address that. Sex tourism is not new. And black men probably should not be the face of sex tourism. But in this moment, today, in November and December of 2022, there are a bunch of people, or at least there's a bunch of viral content that's being created by these men, and they are making themselves the face of sex tourism. And then when you ask them about it, they, like, if black men were to somehow become the face of sex tourism, it would be a self-inflicted wound, man.
Indeed. And then when you consider that now countries, you posted a TikTok about this, Korey, now countries are starting to create certain regulations, like what is it, making
Well, so
premarital sex illegal?
it was specifically Indonesia. So
Okay.
Indonesia recently passed a law that premarital sex is against the law for any tourist as well as for the citizens of that nation. And
Mm,
everybody sort of, the passport bro critique of that was, well, that's a Muslim nation. Nobody goes to Muslim nations for sex tourism. And then I was like, that is not true. In the UAE, in the United Arab Emirates, in Dubai specifically, and I'm sure there are other places, in the Middle East where people travel that are international and more cosmopolitan, where people do come from America specifically for the purpose of sex tourism. It's like, y'all are wrong. Like, people do go to what would be considered Muslim countries for the express purpose of sex tourism.
Pierre, I have a question for you, and actually for all of us. But in your interactions, I don't know if you have had interactions with people who are passport bros. What do those kind of go like? And when you're trying to sort of educate them on like the how problematic what they're engaging in is extremely problematic, what is like the typical response that you're receiving?
I remember I think it was earlier this year before the passport bros overall, like from what I know, or maybe like late last year, there was a talk on Twitter about sex tourism, specifically around men going to the DR and going to Colombia. So it's like Korey said, it's not a new thing, and also white men have been doing it for literally generations now. That's literally how colonization works. But like what I try to do, particularly when I like in my style of education as an educator, like getting in the community as well as online, is I try to make connections, try to make patterns so people can understand what they're doing, right? Look at the history of colonialism and colonization. This is what white men have been doing to people of color for years now, right? So why are we now doing the same exact thing of literally leaving our land to go to other lands to literally dominate women? You are the only people getting online, literally showing your passport, saying what you're doing, making videos about where to go, when to go, who's there. That's literally predatory behavior. And correlated back to domestic violence, the thing, I think the cognitive dissonance they have a lot too is that they're saying that they're looking for equal partnership. So as in they're the dominant ones and then the equalness would be the submissive woman. But if you're seeking a partner who needs you for survival, automatically that creates a power imbalance. Right? If you want somebody that you know is only marrying you because they're trying to escape a situation, automatically the power is in your hands. It's like can't be equal anymore. But because they've been taught that as a man, the only way to be a man is to be above women, they don't see it as an imbalance. They see it as them basically taking the rights they have as men, basically being entitled to women. That's my again. It's never them acknowledging what I'm saying. It's always a deflection. Okay, go talk to white men about it, or go talk to these people about it, or go talk to women about why they're not being submissive enough. And it's just like, this is literally about what you're telling us you're doing, and what we're literally defining it as what it is, which is something that's been going on for years now. But to them, it's always a deflection. It's always let's talk. What about XYZ? What about this? It's basically whataboutism when it comes to them, their responses.
Yeah, I didn't realize that you worked for a domestic abuse sort of like help center. I knew that you spoke on these issues, and that when you speak, that it is typically research based and all that stuff. But I didn't realize that you were sort of like an expert in this field. TJ is also an expert in the field, and what Pierre just brought up highlights the shared space that all men of any racial demographic sort of occupy under the colonial construct of patriarchy. And so when we're talking about these men who find community on the internet, and then engage in more sort of patriarchal systems, TJ has been talking about the red pilling of Black men, or the pipelines that lead to extreme conservative ideology, or white supremacist ideology, for a while now. And that was specifically why I thought TJ would be a perfect person to speak on this issue.
And for you as well, TJ, could you also give us a rundown of your interactions with men who are passport bros?
Oh, it's just riddled. It is riddled with misogyny and cyberbullying and very condescending, very demeaning responses that I get no matter how I approach the topic. I can approach the topic which is what I usually try to do. Usually, I try to approach the topic from a lens of education, and I say, okay, just because you say this isn't bad doesn't mean that it's not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think you understand how everything you're saying in a professional form of work equals sex tourism,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, going back to Pierre's line of work, what I see all the time in his responses on the responses that he gets on the internet is people basically rephrasing abusive relationships, right?
Mm-hmm.
Saying like, I'm not, how is that abuse? I just want to be in control of my household 24/7. Like, are you, did you hear what you just said? Like, I'm not
Mm-hmm.
sure. And so a lot of the times when I am trying to reframe the conversation for these passport bros and potential passport bros, I am met with that. With
Mm-hmm.
how is literally explain to me how going across the country to find love is sex tourism. I I'm trying to figure out how, like, you're asking me, explain to me how blue jeans are a shade of blue. You see what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
you're just like I'm like, well, because it's denim and denim is a
Mm-hmm.
shade of blue. Like, that's
Mm-hmm.
literally what you're asking. Like, that's kind of what you're asking. And then of course, I'm I'm not even met with that most of the time. Most of the times I'm just met with outright cyberbullying and misogyny, because being a woman who speaks on these type of things, especially being a Black woman, the very first recourse that any man has when talking to me is, oh, it must be because you're fat and ugly and single and alone. And that's why you're mad about Black men going overseas, whatever the hell that means, going overseas to find wives.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, I do not care what you do. I just happen to be passionate about stopping the abuse of women and girls.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
And so if I am talking about your behavior, why do you think I'm talking about that? Right? It's quite literally the way that I interact with white people on my page when I talk about issues of race.
Mm-hmm.
Where some once in a while I will get comments saying, you're just bitter about slavery, or you're just mean, you need to get over it. And are you saying that everyone's racist? I'm not saying everyone's racist, sweetie. I'm saying that I am against racism. And there's
Mm-hmm.
only one type of person who would have a problem with that.
Right. A
Right?
racist.
A racist.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So if I tell a man, usually it becomes this clash of, you're doing this because you're a hateful bitch and you're angry at men for going overseas.
Mm-hmm.
Baby, I've taken cruises with men. Like, I go on cruises all the time. Like, I go overseas all the time. It doesn't even matter. It's
Right.
like
Right.
that's, I'm not against Black men traveling.
Mm-hmm.
Nah, it's just that you're leaving out the part where I say I am against the abuse of women and girls. And there's
Right.
only one person who would have a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what also happens is a projection of the anger and a projection of hurt feelings and a projection of defense mechanism going up, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like in the exact same way when I talk to people about race, and all of the little chitter that I hear online and all of
Mm-hmm.
the chitter chatter that I hear in my comments, all I can hear is, I don't think there's a problem with this, and I don't think I'm a bad person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All I
That's
can think
yeah.
of is, are you calling me a bad person?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Are you calling really, because that's what it is, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
when I talk to people about race and they start crying and they get all defensive and angry, all I can hear them say is, my dad thinks exactly like this and I don't think he's a bad guy.
Right.
That's all I'm hearing.
Right.
And it's that and the same thing with men when I talk to them about, like, really any form of misogyny or the passport bro movement. All I can hear is, this is the way my dad treated my mom and I don't think he's a terrible person.
Right.
Or this is the way, or I would do this if I had the money and I don't think I'm a sex trafficker.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Yeah.
but
Because they
instead of
start to see
having,
themselves in what you're
right, to
saying.
see them, yeah, it's like, and that, my friends, is what we mean by hit dogs hollering. You see what I'm
Yep.
saying? So like they holler in my comments, and it usually is, and again, because men are only really given permission to feel anger and sexual arousal, that is how the insults are usually projected at me.
Yeah.
They're very angry towards me. The Twitter fingers get real bold. We get in all caps. We start cussing and fussing. Um, or we get this like reverse sexual arousal, which is like, I would never be with you. You're unattractive and you're fat, and no man would ever be with you, and that's why you're bitter and you're saying these things. Extreme projection, extreme maturity, and I could get pettier, but I won't.
I'm fine with you getting pettier. Like, you don't have to hold back. But I have another question, a follow-up question is like, widening the perspective a bit, how concerned should we be from the perspective of like, okay, is this something that is attractive to a lot of men? Like, how many of them do we think are potentially considering like becoming a passport bro? Like, or should we just be like, you know what? You guys are losers. You guys are lame. Let's just figure out ways that we can protect the women that you guys are trying to abuse and just let y'all be.
If I can answer off this one, I think because TJ might end it off better than I can. Something I've been noticing, and I think the correlation I've been saying is that because of the pandemic and how for a lot of boys, but also a lot of men, they're kind of stuck at home for a while, and all they can consume was online content. And the online content they were consuming was what seemed at the time most easily digestible, which was outright red pill content. So even right now, I got a lot of freshman boys that I work with in high schools who are huge, I mean, boldly huge fans of Andrew Tate. I mean, they will tell you how much boldly they love Andrew Tate. And then we bring up the fact that there's some videos of him online, talking about beating women and hurting women and, all these different things. They'll still look at you dead in your face and be like, he's a great person. He's a great man. He's this amazing person. So I do think it is very dangerous because a lot of men right now, they feel as if they are victims because they are not receiving the women they think they were entitled to receive. And also, that's something I want to talk about that was mentioned earlier about the gender war thing. I never like the term gender war because the term war implies there's equal efforts on both sides. Like both people are going at it are equal, and that's not the case at all. And the fight, the war that men are worried about is not being able to say they can control women anymore.
Yeah.
The war they're having is maybe losing their grip on like the control they have on the rest of the world. And they see that as an attack on their character because they've been taught their whole lives they should be strong, be dominant, be leaders, and that's not happening anymore. So now they're lashing out at people. And like Jamila said, like I'm not against men traveling. I've been traveling for a while now too. I'm very well traveled actually. Um, it's this things where like we're still teaching boys and men that sex is something they need to do and need to have in life to survive. And then instead of teaching them to respect women and respect women's boundaries, there's men telling them, hey, you can still achieve this goal by going to this place.
Okay.
So so it seems enticing to them to want to do it, and I think it could be leading to bigger things if you don't address it soon enough. Especially as black men, if we're not addressing soon enough, we're gonna pass it down to our children. And uh, I remember this back when I was in college. I was like 20 years old maybe, and I used to work retail. And I remember this one kid. He was not a kid. He was actually older than me. I think he was like maybe it was in his mid-20s maybe. And he was telling us a story about how his dad was a pilot from in Jamaica, and whenever his dad would do like business trips, he'd invite him and his friends, like him, like the dad would invite him and his the kid and his friends to trips with him, like either going to Brazil or going to wherever they went. And he was bragging about how he would sleep with women on these trips, like deliberately unprotected, and then leave
Oh my
because he
God.
knew he would not come back anymore. Like, and again, his dad knew this, and his dad was literally bringing him with him on these trips to do these things. So I think, like again, for a lot of black men, particularly, like it is something that seems enticing because they're able to say they're traveling as well as being able to say that they're having women. Because there's something a response I've been getting online too when I talk about sex tourism. Like Jamila said, like they don't know what it is in their minds. They're saying, "Oh, what's wrong with traveling and having sex?" No one said it's not a
Okay.
bad thing. No one's saying it's a
Yeah,
bad thing. It's about where you're traveling to and why you're going to that place.
right. It's like
Because
that
obviously,
conversation of intent and impact combined.
exactly, exactly. It's literally like, why are you going to this place, like this place specifically, right? And also, like, what's the reason you're going there, right? Like,
Hmm.
is and then that's what sex tourism is. Again, you're literally going somewhere and taking advantage of the lack of restrictions on prostitution, lack of restrictions on all these different things. Just take advantage of those things and knowing that you'll be able to get away with certain things because of your privilege as a person from the West.
Hmm. Hmm.
So yeah, I think it could get worse if we don't talk about it. For sure.
Hmm.
If I
That's
can, oh, sorry,
Corey, you
go
go.
ahead, Jimmy.
Go. Okay, I'll go and then Corey, you'll go. Because I think the thing I have been pondering is like, okay, there's a lot of men who are not in this whole passport bro situation. So I'm like, do we just need to focus our energy in a more positive way where we're like, you know what, be more like these men, try to be like this. Look at how they're living an emotionally balanced life and they're not so angry and all this stuff. Or do we need to just start calling them out, calling out like the passport bros directly. And I've just like been sort of juggling with where is the balance in that, because part of me, it's hard for me to not look at the passport bros from like this perspective of like, okay, not only are you like pathetic, but you refuse to look inward and have like just one introspective moment of like maybe wondering why literally nobody wants you in your country, like why no one wants to be around you. And so it's hard for me to feel any form of like empathy for that, because that's all I feel like I see Black women doing and the Black men who are emotionally balanced doing. But Corey, you go ahead.
Yeah, so I just wanted to say that Pierre and I are the only men on this round table, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I it has taken me it has taken me the past 10 years to unlearn the problematic views that were instilled in me growing up. I'm 30 now, I'll be 31 soon. Uh, I started sort of my decolonial journey when I was in undergrad. And so Cindy and I, we recorded a bit earlier this week, sort of talking about the through line of patriarchy and how we got to where we are today. Um, and so when I get feedback and pushback from people in my community of my demographic, from Black men, about like their feelings and about some of the projections that TJ sort of discussed and described, what I've been trying to do um, is couch my rhetoric in the fact that some of the isms, right? Sexism, racism, homophobia, all of that stuff, all of these problematic behaviors that we're seeing the needle move in a progressive manner in the US, that those are the sons of white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
You have the construct of white supremacy, which is Europeans deciding in the late 15th century that that they deserve to spread their influence globally, right? And so from 1492, from Columbus and Amerigo Vespucci, um, the world gets colonized, right? A nation celebrates its independence from the British Empire almost every week. And so the thing that has been the thread that I've been trying to pull as I engage in these conversations with people who hold um, problematic ideas that are born of white supremacy is, if it is wrong for a white person to do it, right? In a historic context, even in a present context, why are you so apt to want to engage in the same abusive behaviors that for you and your potentially marginalized community that you critique and criticize all the time, right? So that has been like my question, right? we got white supremacy. Out of white supremacy, we got patriarchy, we got racism. As a black man, right? I want racism to end, but I also realize that racism doesn't only affect or primarily negatively affect black men, right? If we're taking an intersectional approach um, to a liberation praxis, to trying to make the world a better place for everyone by making ourselves better, black women in the U.S., Malcolm X, the black woman is the most disrespected person in America, that still holds true today. And so when I ask these men why they want to emulate, like I said, these white supremacist strategies, again, all I get is like deflection. But I also, like Pierre said, I can see like the hurt, right? Because Sydney, we spoke about post-traumatic enslavement disorder in black people that leads us to embrace ideologies that give us a stronger sense of identity, I guess. Because if you didn't grow up in like an Afrocentric household, and if you're not taught the true history of Black people's role in the US and then globally, it makes sense that people would believe sort of like heinous and demonstrably false myths like, no, 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 black people are the original Jews. And Hitler didn't have
Mm-hmm.
a problem with black people. He had a problem with those fake Jews because they're white. It's like, you don't have to engage in anti Semitism and praise of Hitler like to feel connected to an identity. You don't have to leave the black identity to feel
Mm-hmm.
connected to the identity. You just need to learn more about who you are and where we come from.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's like the broader discussion to me is we are losing young black men. And for the older ones, like if they want to work on it themselves, that's fine. But Pierre talking about having, these youths being obsessed with Andrew Tate. We've been, 3 years in lockdown, and the internet is a treacherous place to navigate when you're young. I don't want to see the reproduction of these harmful ideals and ideologies again. And like
Mm-hmm.
Bell Hooks wrote in her book, um, The Will to Change Men, Masculinity, and Love, one of the things she says in the early chapters is uh, men who unlearn patriarchy typically do not write books about it. So I
Mm-hmm.
want to leave a body of work that says, I disagree with these things. Here are the issues with these things. And if do unto others if you would have them do unto you, right? If you wouldn't want this happening in your community, why would you then go and foster it in other communities?
Mm-hmm. And we definitely had that conversation in the previous two episodes me and Korey did. But I also want to know and maybe sort of just brainstorm like what are some preventative measures that us as like respective content creators can do to sort of maybe include black men before they get to this point where they get their passport and then engage in sex tourism. What can we do? What sort of conversations can we have to keep them from getting to that point? Anybody can answer.
I mean, for me, I always say the biggest tool is education. If we get more education out there, we can get more awareness out there.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's one of those things where people who aren't open to education aren't going to learn because
Mm-hmm.
again, they're already being dismissive. Um, I will say I got something else too. It's one of those things where you need the right type of education because a lot of men who try to educate kind of still reinforce harmful behaviors.
Okay.
Um, yeah, because you see men saying like, "Oh, as a man, you should be strong and you should respect women, but also don't let women talk any kind of way to you." It's like, wait, hold on, like this, let's like, what are you trying to say here, right? Like the
Mm-hmm.
message might sound good, but there's always these things. And again, we're not saying you shouldn't get your passport, whatever it is. Understand why you're getting your passport.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, like I said, but I think the issue people have when I say education, because I think a creator, Shaheem, their therapist, they've made content about when you try to tell people that education is the tool to end violence. They don't like hearing that, because what people are looking for you typically is the easy answer.
Yes.
Right? They're looking for, like, give me the one thing I can do right now to make sure it never happens again. That's not realistic.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna take time for sure, and it's gonna take a lot of unlearning for sure. But I think as creators, we're doing pretty well. Of course, maybe the way we say certain things could be better, but sometimes, again, with content, you only got like a minute or 3 minutes. You can't say everything in there.
Right.
I think we're doing enough. I think, again, the disconnect is that people often don't care to learn, or they don't want to learn.
Right.
And it's one of those things where it's gonna take somebody. Maybe it's not us yet. Maybe it's not somebody else. Maybe there's a person out there who hasn't started making content yet. But it's gonna take more educators out there to start learning and then passing on the information. Like Korey said, men unlearn the patriarchy, and then they hold it. They hold on to it. They don't share it with anybody. I think something I've noticed too with the kids I work with, because there's some kids I work with for like 3-4 years now. And they know the work, like they understand why things are harmful, they understand what systems are in place, but they don't speak up because they know they're the only person in the room that knows it. They don't want to be that person to speak up first.
Yeah. So kind of
There's
just like scared.
Yeah, there's that fear of being ostracized because I'm saying this, and I don't want to look like the quote unquote simp. I don't want to look like the quote unquote the person that's ruining everybody's fun.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't want to be the person that gets ostracized in my own community, like community of men or community of Black people, whatever it might be, by saying this thing first. And again, I guess something we need, right, is the boldness of it all. Like, I have to be able to, admit that this is an issue and take whatever comes with it, right? And then if I have to find a community of people to hang out with, that's what I have to do. But we can't stay silent about it.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Agreed. I definitely agree. What about you, TJ? What are your thoughts on like different preventative measures that we can take as content creators?
Whew, glad I had a mic back. I think that I will say that I disagree with the notion that people just don't want to learn. And I'm a teacher at my heart. I'm a teacher at my core. And that is usually what is going to make me, that bias is usually what's going to make me say that I disagree with that statement. Because I don't think it's that people don't want to learn. I think that people don't want to change. And it is that fear of the learning causing changed behavior. Right? Because people have no problem learning new information. The impasse comes when you say, okay, now that you have this information, is your opinion different? Do you think your opinion should be different? Do you think your action should be different given this information? Given this information, that is where, for me, where the impasse comes in. But I also know that I cannot control other people's behavior. And I do not take being a content creator, I don't take on the role of content creator as superhero, as it's my job to stop the bank robbery just in time. It's my job to bust it. You know what I mean? It's my job to be preventative, because a lot of the times, by the time you get to my TikTok, I don't know what stage in this learning or unlearning process that you are in, right?
Yeah.
Long story long, my my big push for education is always going to be like, remember when I said a while ago that I could be pettier, but I won't?
Yes.
A lot of the times I'm making a conscious choice to focus on the education and to focus on the unpacking of whatever feelings might arise because of that. So what I've started to do is more on Twitter than on TikTok, but I'm want to take this strategy and transport it over there too, is I've just started responding particularly to men with, and how does that make you feel? Because you have like there's a feeling here that you are there's a feeling here that you're feeling, and the way that you are expressing that emotion is to type 500 words in my comments.
Right.
Another way that I respond is to say it's okay to just say you don't know or to say that you don't understand,
Mhm.
because what I find fascinating with men is they will equate I don't know with this doesn't exist.
Right.
And oh, the superpower they have to do that sometimes is just whoo. I really do wish that, like, if we could just get to, like, just say you didn't know about that and
Mhm.
we can all go home, right? Just say you
Right.
didn't know about that so we can all go home and it'll be fine.
Mhm.
So as far as what I can do as a content creator, I can do that, and I can provide education, and I can also provide a way for you to have a dialogical conversation with yourself.
Mhm.
Uh, if you're the audience being familiar with philosophy and, like, of course, old dead white man philosophy, right? Like the idea of having a consistent conversation with yourself, asking
Mhm.
yourself the same question over and over again until you figure out what you believe and why you believe it.
Mhm.
And a lot of people have never been challenged on those two questions before. And I
Mhm.
think that that's something that as content creators we can also do.
Mhm.
Just to keep challenging with those two questions, like, what do you believe and why do you believe it?
Mhm.
What do you believe about women? And what do you believe about women that isn't present in Black women? And why do you
Mhm.
believe that?
Right.
And why do you
Right.
believe that? Why do you believe, because Captain Logical, you solutions oriented, right?
Mhm.
And so when you, so I'm assuming because men, Captain Logical, I'm assuming that you have created a list of solutions to this particular problem that you are having,
Mhm.
which is finding someone that you would like to spend a considerable amount of time with. So you not having that is a problem for you.
Mhm. Mhm.
So you believe, so first off, you believe that's a problem, right? You're a grown man who does not have someone to lay with at night, who does not have someone who doesn't, there is a need that is not being met. And that's a
Mhm.
problem for you. So you
Mhm.
believe that's a problem. And why do you believe that?
Mhm.
And you believe that men are logical. And so that means that the ideas that you have automatically make sense. Why do you believe that?
Mhm.
Because a lot of times a man ended up being a passport bro because, or even a red pill misogynist, because men are conditioned to believe that every thought that they have is a good one because we
Right.
are because not seriously because when you condition men with a lifetime of men are logical, men are logical, men are logical, a lot of people will not be able to differentiate between men are logical and every thought that men have is good and right and normal.
Mhm.
And a lot of people, which is kind of why we see these internet spirals, these like emotional breakdowns online, is because like you have not faced the fact that you might be wrong about something, because culturally, socially, you are conditioned to believe that men are consistently logical, and you are somehow conflating that with everything you think is something that you should do.
Mm.
And so you haven't thought through that. What do you believe and why do you believe it?
Mhm.
How did we go from I am lonely to I need to get a passport and go to another country? Like, how did we get there, and why do you believe that that is an appropriate correction for that problem? I want to ask all of these men when I see a passport, because I don't have a lot of empathy for the companionship part, Sydney. Truly, I don't. Like, I do
Right.
believe it's like you are lonely and you're sad about it, and you need to say that, and you need to write about it and talk
Mhm.
about that.
Mhm.
But I have a lot of empathy for what the context might be,
Mhm.
because when I see these passport bros, when I see how angry they look or how empty their eyes look, all I want to ask is, were you whooped as a child?
Mm.
Because what this is doing is it's giving over correction, right?
Right.
It seems like you grew up in an environment where hurt feelings or any type of problem or anger or sadness was met with an overcorrection of action,
Mhm.
specifically an overcorrection that did not take into account how you might feel.
Mm.
Like, that's clearly what happened. So what I'm actually seeing is a young Black boy who was whooped for literally everything, who
Mhm.
literally got his ass whooped for everything, for running too fast, for walking too slow, for crying too much, for not crying enough, for
Mhm.
cleaning up his room, but not fast enough. So it's like all of these things are an overcorrection. And so I also want to ask, where did you learn to overcorrect like that?
Mhm.
Because you bypassed all the dating apps, you bypassed all the dating coaches. If you're out there under the sound of my voice, there are people that you can pay who actually have degrees, not the ones off the Instagram. There are people who have degrees and who are trained in companionship and psychology and individual and collective psychology, who can help you, who are professional matchmakers. And
Mhm.
that's what they do. You skip past eHarmony, Captain Logical, which is full of all kinds of science or pseudoscience, depending on what actual scientist you ask, whatever. I believe it. That this algorithm that is full of algorithms that are supposed to match you with somebody that you like.
Mhm.
You skipped church, you skipped all of these options for finding a partner. And you said, I'm going to go to the passport office and go to another country and let my stereotype flag fly.
Mhm.
The
Where did
logistics of
you
it are
learn?
insane.
No, it
Yeah.
is insane.
Where
Like
did you learn to overcorrect like that?
when you talk about all the steps like that were
Yeah.
not taken, like you could have started with Tinder and then continuously
Work your way
move.
up. It's wild. Yeah.
But
You
then to just be like, you
Tinder,
know what,
Flint
I'm getting my
Fish. Yeah.
passport, I'm spending $1,000 on a flight, and I'm going to like Cambodia or something like that. And so like I agree, that is insane. And I have another question for you. Is like I posted a video about the passport bros, and somebody was like, one of them, he was like, well, you guys don't ever actually listen to us. Like someone needs to listen to us. And so are they feeling unheard? Because
Absolutely.
they do a lot of talking, and it's hard for me to listen when they're talking and what they're saying is just stereotype after stereotype about me, right? So when they're saying like, well, you guys aren't submissive enough, I'm like turning off my ears, like I'm literally putting the volume down or skipping past, like I'm not gonna engage with this. So it's like, how do you engage with when someone is saying something about you that is just wrong? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do I have that conversation with you when what you're saying towards me is hateful?
I also have a community organizing background, and I've literally been the one from I've been the one in church doing the like prayer sessions.
Mhm.
I've had the visuals, I've had the marches, to standing outside of city council in all black, standing on tables saying Black Lives Matter, you're gonna respect me, right?
Right.
Um your question was how do you process that and continue to engage when what they're saying to you is hateful?
Mhm.
Um I have learned to accept that they're not talking to me. And in a
Okay.
lot of ways, I have to ask. And in a lot of times, I will ask because I've also been in education. And
Mhm.
I have been in a high school and had a trash can kicked at me.
Mm.
And I've had to ask, who you throwing that at? Because it ain't me.
Mhm.
Oh, so what's happening is, because I was a TA at the time. So I'm just like,
Mhm.
okay, what's happening is the instructor puts you out of class.
Mhm.
And that brought you back to a moment where you feel discarded when there is an issue or conflict. And so you
Mhm.
feel discarded. And so the way that you are coping with that is through this anger, this moment full of anger that is disrespecting the space. And it doesn't
Mhm.
matter that you're disrespecting the space because you just got put out of it.
Mhm.
Right. So it's kind of like, that's what I'm seeing on the internet. That's also what I'm seeing.
Mhm.
When I hear these, well, you're just bitter and you're just angry and you're just single and you're just sad, I just go, okay, so, and I genuinely, when I ask this question, I'm not trying to be petty. I am not trying to um to ruffle feathers in, I'm not even trying to trigger you in any kind of way, but I really do want to ask them, so is that how your mom talked to you?
Mm.
Because all I see is someone who is trying to be heard, who
Mhm.
is trying to be heard. And there is a tantrum in here about trying to be heard and that not happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because by the time you are typing, because another process that's wild to me is typing in all caps and cuss words at someone that you don't know on the internet, someone that you only know from the top up, and then hitting send on like and then doing that like 3 or 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
So which happens to Black women on the internet quite literally every time we open our mouths.
Right, right.
That's
Very familiar
also
with that.
very familiar, right? That's also a process that baffles me. And I
Mhm.
have to understand that they're not talking to me. And
Okay.
sometimes I will directly ask, who are you talking to?
Mm.
Is
I like
that
that
what you
response.
wish you could say to your mom?
Mm-hmm.
And I really do mean that. I am not trying to, I am truly asking that question. So when you
Mm-hmm.
say these things to me, you don't care, and that's why we're leaving. I don't know you. You don't know me. Is
Mm-hmm.
that what you wish you could say to your ex-girlfriend?
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you wished you could say to your mom or your grandma or your aunt, but you never felt like you had the power to do so? And now
Mm-hmm.
you've grown and you feel like you can stand up for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Or were you always told by people in your life that when you in my house, you gotta do whatever the fuck I say? You ain't got no options.
Mm-hmm.
Were you always told that you didn't have no options and that you had to be stuck in a particular place? Did your daddy take the doors off the room
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't have no privacy in his house? And so now you're grown and you are itching at the chance to escape, to go somewhere, to
Mm-hmm.
have your freedom, to be able to say, this is mine now. Who are you
Right.
talking to? Because
Right.
now you have another woman in your face when you say, I'm leaving. I actually don't have the power to say, as long as you in this house, you're going to obey my rules. You actually have the power to run away when something's happening that you don't like.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I see. I don't just see mean comments. I don't just see hateful comments.
Mm-hmm.
When I see men doing that, I see unmet needs, I see tantrums, but they are more dangerous because you're not a 3-year-old throwing a truck.
Right.
You are a grown ass man punching a hole in the wall.
Mm-hmm.
So, like,
Right.
that's something different.
Mm-hmm.
You are a grown ass man literally making violent threats at women online.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to be concerned with my safety in that regard. But I also have to just remember they're not talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
By the time you get to that point, you didn't do all that just so you can cuss me out.
Mm-hmm.
Who did you want to cuss out before me that you didn't feel like you had the power or the chance to?
Mm-hmm. I think for me, since I'm pretty new to the content creator journey and I'm only 21, so I don't have a ton of life experience in dealing,
Girl,
with
I got 10 years on you. Black don't crack. I love it.
Yeah, so like I'm only 21, so it's like whenever I encounter like bigotry or like hatefulness like in my comments, I'm like ignore, like I'm not doing this with you, or I'll just like block them. Because it's like, I think for me, I've not looked at it from that perspective of like, okay, let me compartmentalize this because they're not talking to me, because I just see them commenting on my page going buck wild, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna just block you and then you won't be able to see me ever again type thing. And so I like the idea of having more of like a Socratic method in my approach to those kinds of responses.
And that's clear. And let's be clear, Cindy, you don't have to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you also don't if someone's disrespecting you to your face,
Mm-hmm.
you don't owe nobody you don't owe anybody grace in that way. You
Mm-hmm.
don't. You don't owe
Mm-hmm.
nobody grace in that way.
Right.
I do have it's like it's like a spreadsheet in my head. It's
Mm-hmm.
like these words and phrases signal to me that you're too far gone and we got to block you.
Okay.
These words and phrases, these words and phrases, or I will go back and forth 3 times with you.
Mm-hmm.
And then we will let those comments sit and move on. And you
Mm-hmm.
can have the last word, and that's great. And
Mm-hmm.
this also comes from my background in education, my background in teaching is like, this is what, so a lot of people are like, well, Jamila, what's the secret sauce? Like, how do you
Mm-hmm.
do this? It's like, because I do this in real life, and those are the skills that I had to develop that
Right.
I had to bring into the digital space. So be
Mm-hmm.
patient with yourself, and also be cool with your hard limits and your hard boundaries, because
Mm-hmm.
when certain words are said, I'm like, you actually might be a bot. Actually, I'm not even sure if you're an actual person. Like, I'm not finna do, you know what I mean? Like, the
Yeah.
whole education and back and forth, I make a commitment to not do that with accounts that do not have profile pictures, because I don't know who you are. I don't know what you're doing. Right? Like,
Yeah.
I don't have time. Like, I don't have time to be arguing with an anime character. I don't know what you're doing. Like, I don't know who you are. Right? And so I think that that's a good way to. We also have to be careful and have to be safe.
Yeah.
As content creators doing this particular work. And I know I've been talking a lot, but real quick before we bounce off to the next question, it's not just about the question you asked before about the severity of the passport bro conversation. And it's a severe conversation because of just how pervasive the manosphere internet culture is. So passport bros are just the most recently popularized offshoot of red pill internet manosphere culture. And of course, I'll send you some links that you can put in the show notes and all of that good stuff.
Okay. Please do.
Yeah, because I think I'm looking at it right now. The RAND study, it's a nonprofit research, big giant research firm. They're actually doing and have done a lot of work on the study of extremism online and how online extremism, particularly with men, presents itself, and how fast a boy, not a man, a boy can go from "I'm on the internet" to "I love Kevin Samuels," or the other guy's name, or "I love Andrew Tate," and how quickly that can happen and how that is manufactured through manosphere content. And so I think the Passport Bros conversation is not something to be ignored, because it is an offshoot of a larger problem, which is the manosphere. Because also, what do you do with the people who think that exact same way, but are angry about the fact that they don't know where to start about traveling outside of the country? It's like, nah, I don't want you abusing people here either.
Yeah.
I don't want you abusing people here either because you can't afford a passport yet. Like, I'm not really like, I can't. We have to stop these behaviors, and they're real, and we're not making them up. Truly, we're not. Literally, the FBI is releasing reports about during election seasons being vigilant about extremist groups that are um that are galvanized, or that are seeing membership increases. Seeing membership increases, the more hate they push out online towards women, people of color, trans people, and all of that. So we're not crazy to be taking this seriously. We're not.
Right. And for you, Pierre, how do you sort of engage with like the passport bros when you do see like a certain level of bigotry? Like, where is the line for you where it's like, I can't engage with this person? There is no way that I can help educate this person at all.
For me, like, I know earlier I said some people don't want to learn, but me, I still have hope that I can say the right words in the right way that is going to get to somebody. So I try to phrase things as simple as I can, or as I try to make the correlations as easy as I can, especially because I think, like, I feel like if you're not an able-bodied, white, straight, cisgender man, you'd understand some kind of oppression, right? Because there's been something against you. So I'm always leaning on, there's always that hope with them. So I try to word things a different way, and I try to ask them, like, just ask them to think about what you're saying, right? So what does this mean, right? I think I like Jimmy, like, okay, let's think out what the source or the root of this is. I think for me, I kind of start giving up when because for me, I'm also very good at getting people to admit that they say something wrong. Like, I'm able to, because if you repeat something back to somebody, like the way they said it to you, they'll hear it. But like I said, the reason I said they don't want to learn is that they don't want to learn from me or certain creators. They also don't want to admit that they're wrong. Right. So they hear how crazy it sounds, and then they bring up a whole new topic. So what about, like, just like, so I think once I get to that point where I just see you kind of going far, like, away from the topic in general, that's when, okay, like, yeah, I've lost you. And I feel content knowing, because you weren't able to admit that what you said was wrong, you know it's wrong. Now you just don't want to change your behavior.
Right.
Right. So
Because
for
they
me,
will deflect and deflect and deflect and deflect
exactly.
all the
So
way
like,
into a
yeah, because
different
you realize
conversation.
this, that like to listen to Jamila talk. There's actually a kid that I'm working with now in this class. Because of the fact that he's been told he's supposed to be this logical person, he'll tell you things. You ask him a question about it, and he'll stop, and he's like, "It makes sense to me." I'm like, "Okay, why does it make sense to you and you only?" The whole class is looking at you now, right? Everybody around, there's not one person in here that agrees with you anymore. So why does that only make sense to you? He's like, "Oh, because I know what I'm thinking." Right, but he
Yeah.
can't admit out loud that he's in the wrong, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like if you see people eventually get to the point where they don't care to switch or even consider what you're saying, then it's just like, well, we're just gonna stop here.
Mhm.
But yeah, no, I mean, that's for me. That's as far as it goes. Like once I realized that you at this point it's just about deflection. I can't keep going off the deflections with you because I give you about maybe like 2 or 3 chances. After that, it's okay. We're just done here.
Right. So I have like one last question before closing everything out. As far as like when having these types of conversations, like you said, Pierre, like you try to, maybe change your wording around and stuff like that. I watched like a podcast and they were talking about how maybe if people weren't using words like patriarchy or misogyny or stuff of that nature, that maybe without using those words that have been kind of popularized recently, that you could potentially reach more men. Do you guys like agree with that assertion or no? And then explain why you don't. Or
Never.
You wanna go
Never.
first?
Yeah, go first, please.
I was gonna ask you, do you want to go first?
No, you can.
All right. I will say it's one of those things where it brings them in, right? It's just like, okay, cool, yeah. All right, that makes sense. Yeah, for sure. And it's just like, but now this name the problem,
Right.
right? Because men, like even racists, they'll agree that. I mean, there's studies on this multiple times where white people will want services that are for poor people or for underprivileged people. Once you tell them that it's gonna also support black people, nah, we don't want this anymore.
Right.
Even though it benefits everybody, once you tell them this is for everyone, not just white people, it's like no. So for a lot of men, it's like okay, how women expect you to be the breadwinner is harmful, right? It's like yeah, you men commit suicide at a high rate is very bad, right? It's like yeah, for sure. Violence against men is bad. Yeah, yep, absolutely. Okay, cool. What is that called? This is not creating all those things.
Right.
I don't know what is it. Patriarchy? No, there you go. Why you wanna? It's like, but I'm a big believer, and you have to name the problem. I can't just keep saying there's issues, not naming the problem, because what we got to talk about is the problem, not the symptoms of the problem.
Right.
Right, because again, you talk to men about these different things: suicide amongst men, gender roles, violence against men, all these different things. They hate it.
Right.
They think it's horrible. Once you tell them the source of it is white supremacy, it is patriarchy, it is misogyny, they'll literally agree with you and it'll retract all their agreements.
Right.
Like they'll literally be like, "Yeah, I'm with you. Keep going. Yeah, we're with you. Patriarchy. Nah, fuck all that." Like, it's
exactly. Exactly.
Oh man. When I tell you I have this damn near committed to memory, I have it saved as a screenshot in every important file. In every place I would ever think to look, I have this paragraph from Martin Luther King's letter from the Birmingham jail. It reads thusly: I must make two honest confessions to you, my Christian and Jewish brothers. First, I must confess that over the past few years, I have been gravely disappointed in the white moderate. I have almost reached the regrettable conclusion that the Negro's greatest stumbling block in his stride towards freedom is not the White Citizens Counselor. White Citizens Council was a off-brand KKK, or the Ku Klux Klanner, but the white moderate, who is more devoted to order than to justice. who prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice, who constantly says, I agree with you in the goal you seek, but I cannot agree with your methods of direct action, who paternalistically believes he can set the timetable for another man's freedom, who lives by a mythical concept of time, and who constantly advises the Negro to wait for a more convenient season. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. That last part is really where it hits for me. I have seasons where different parts of this just hit me in the soul, but for right now, it is the last part. Shallow understanding from people of goodwill is more frustrating than absolute misunderstanding from people of ill will. Lukewarm acceptance is much more bewildering than outright rejection. And so I would just like to put it to you that men, including the men on that podcast, and I would love to have a deeper conversation if they would so choose to. But those who continuously say or suggest that the only thing separating understanding and forward movement the only thing separating men from forward movement and justice seeking is the tone of voice of which we present it to them. The words that we use when we are talking about the system that oppresses us. In 1963, Martin Luther King gives us a script for why that's wrong, because it presents a shallow understanding of what the real problem is.
Right.
Do you really think the real problem is my word choice? 65% of people who are trafficked around the globe are women and girls. Most of that number are also trafficked for the purpose of relationships of some kind with men. Do you really think that saying the word patriarchy is the reason why shit can't get done?
Right.
I have a beach in Kansas to sell you. If you believe that, you cannot possibly believe that the only thing keeping, now that's what'll make me laugh at you. That's what will make me laugh in your face. I said, no. Even you can't be that removed from what's actually going on.
Right.
Seriously, the police have killed more people in 2022 than they have in every year before 2022. You really mean to tell me that the core problem is that we're not asking nice enough for them to have better training?
Right.
You can't tell me that that's the problem. Well, when you say police brutality, their minds just shut off, and that's what makes them want to pick up a gun and kill unarmed people. Like, that cannot possibly be your framing. Like, that can't possibly be your framing. Like, and again, if it is, I'm going to ask the critical question: were you whooped as a child, and who taught you how to overcorrect like that?
Right.
Because yet again, because your feelings are hurt about a certain word, you're just like, fuck women's equality? Sir! Like, that cannot be. Who taught you to overcorrect like that?
Right.
I'm gonna become a supervillain. I was on board, and then here's another thing. And Sydney, I remember commenting this on your TikTok and said, "Oh Lord, I hope she don't think I'm being like the mean big sister," because I believe that men know exactly what those words mean.
Right. Okay.
It's not that, oh well, they don't know and did it. No, you know exactly what patriarchy means. You know exactly what misogyny means, and that is why you shut down when I say it to you.
Right.
Because you are doing the male equivalent of, are you calling me a racist? That's not what I'm saying. That's
Mhm.
not what I said. I said that these are
Talk to him.
that these are work. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
could do this all day and we could do this next time. I do it every week because
Right.
like the conversation needs to be had and the unpacking needs to be done
Mhm.
because I could because that conversation will make me get petty, Sydney. That's what will make me get petty because I will be like, hold on, Captain Logical. I thought y'all didn't have. I thought y'all feelings didn't guide y'all that much.
Right.
But
Right.
you're saying that that there are two words in the English language that make you shut down so hard that you can't even be on board with justice for women.
Mhm.
I thought you wasn't led by your emotions like that, Captain Logical.
Right. Right.
Even
I
if you
mhm.
did, even if those words were the most, even if those words were completely inaccurate, and
Mhm.
we could use something else. What happened to facts over feelings? That still don't, I
Mhm.
said what I said. That still don't change the dynamic.
Right.
Right. So
Right.
when you start telling me stuff like, well, if you just use these words, maybe we'll be more on board. It's like, I'm not gonna do this thing where you hold being a good human hostage until I make you feel like doing it.
Right.
Because what happened to all those 30 for 30 documentaries that said you have to get up and work out and shoot in the gym whether you feel like doing it or not? Now we talking
Mhm.
about women's rights and you only doing it when you feel like getting up in the morning. I don't have
Mhm.
I don't have it to
Right.
give. Get that out of my face. We have men who are not on that level of, I don't know the academic way to say this, but on that weak dweeb shit. We
Mhm.
have men who are further than that.
Yeah.
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 And that's all. That's it.
I just want to add too, because to even be able to say that
Shallow understanding.
you're not gonna get on board until this is said is that you know you need to get on board. And again, like Jamila said, you're literally saying I'm gonna not support you in your rights until you do what I need you to do.
Mhm.
So you
Like
do
you lose
understand that there's a
nothing.
dynamic
Right.
You
that
lose
puts
like
you
if rights.
dominant.
If
So
I
you know
never get
what I
rights,
mean? So you do understand the dominant dynamic.
Mhm.
Ah, so
Mhm.
exactly,
patriarchy does exist. Ah, so it is
exactly,
real.
right. And
Mhm.
also, it's literally saying that. What is I was gonna say is that like okay, if I never get rights as like a black person, or if women never get rights, like you lose nothing.
Mhm.
You lose nothing, right? So there's no like loss for you in this, right?
Mhm.
But you know your support literally gets people what they need, and you're choosing not to do anything.
Mm. Right.
And another thing too, 'cause I made this connection today. I saw a black man made this tweet was saying how why do we ask black men to look at their to reevaluate their preferences, right, when it comes to colorism,
Yeah.
but we don't ask women to look at their preferences when it comes to asking for taller men, right?
Right. Mhm.
And this is where it gets interesting because we know the root of colorism is white supremacy, and that impacts how we view race and desirability, right? But for men to say to women to look at the preferences of tallness would be telling women to look at patriarchy and how patriarchy has taught us how to view gender and desirability,
Right.
right? But they can't say patriarchy because they don't have to admit that patriarchy exists.
Mhm.
And if they say patriarchy exists, we can't like again. I
Right.
can't
Right.
say this thing doesn't exist because I'm literally asking you to look into it.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know what I
Exactly.
mean? It's like
I know what you mean. I know what
like
you mean.
Jamila said, they know it's there, but I can't name it because if I name it, I have to talk about how it impacted me too.
Right.
I'm talking about
Right.
this system impacting you and what you want, impacting me and me and what I want.
Mhm.
Right.
Mhm.
But again,
Claiming
I
it's not
can't
a
name
big
it
deal.
because if I name it, it becomes real when I name it. It becomes an actual thing if I name
Right.
it.
A
Right.
thing you
Because
have to face, right? Because it's not a bad thing. I thought it wasn't a big deal. I thought it wasn't a bad thing. I thought we were just being emotional. But now all of a sudden the word is like Voldemort.
mhm.
Why?
mhm.
Is it because patriarchy is bad or something? Ah,
Mhm.
okay. Gotcha. It's because misogyny makes you think of what? Ah,
Mhm.
okay. Why you if you say race, then it makes people shut down. Why? Is racism
Right.
bad or something?
Right.
Ah, okay.
Right. Because it's like, I feel like those words are very actionable, because once you admit that that is a thing, you have to do something about it. And so, like, for the people who are uncomfortable with having to do something about it, they just have to deflect, and then potentially just exit the conversation altogether, because they don't want to do anything about it, because there might be another something else that's benefiting them from it that they don't want to acknowledge either.
Right. It's not that they don't want to learn. It's the fear of changing that comes with that learning.
Right, right, right. What about you, Korey? What are your thoughts on this? You've been a little silent over there.
Well, listen, I've had my say, like I said earlier in the week. I really wanted this
Mhm,
to be a discussion facilitated and sort of spoken about by TJ and Pierre.
mhm.
Wait, what was the question one more time?
So the question in general was, or like the discussion topic was, whether or not when having these conversations with men, like, do we need to not say the word patriarchy and like misogyny and find a way like around that as a way of like maybe bringing them in?
So nothing can be changed until it is faced. I'm sure Jamila can tell us who said that because I can't remember. Was that Malcolm X? I don't know. Nothing can change until it is faced.
Hmm.
And then my favorite sort of Dr. King quote, or a couple of quotes, are injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we
Right.
can never forget the fierce urgency of now.
Hmm.
And so, no, I don't believe in changing the language to accommodate people who know exactly what you mean when you say what it is that you say.
Right.
Um, to get to further Pierre's point and Jamila's point about these men understanding what patriarchy means and its implications, or the lukewarm white moderate who understands what racism is, but chooses to stay in their shallow understanding of the issue, and the corrections needed to address it,
Hmm.
um, is that not only do they understand the term, um, typically they try to counter it, right? When
Hmm.
Black Lives Matter came out, you had the counter of All Lives Matter, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
When discussions of misogyny and misogynoir arise, some men reach for the phrase misandry, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Uh, but there is not a societal, structural, um, material effect, right, of misandry, uh, as opposed to patriarchy. And even then, when we discuss Black women and Black men and she's, these, and theys, and our relationships, romantically, community, otherwise, to suggest that Black women, the people uh, who marry Black men or who marry Black partners more often than Black men statistically,
Hmm.
the people who created the Black Lives Matter hashtag in the wake of Trayvon Martin's mm, like disgusting slaughter 11 years ago. To say that Black women have not been showing up for Black men is a disservice to every Black woman in the US.
Hmm.
And so I can't stomach that. I cannot stomach disrespect for Black people, right, as a whole.
Hmm.
But it is particularly grating to me when that comes from within the community.
Right. Right.
So, no, we don't need to change the language at all. They understand what they're saying, they understand what they're doing.
Hmm. For sure. For sure. But that was my last question that I had for you guys. I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to have this discussion, which I feel is, much needed. And I also want to thank you all for actually doing the work and the willingness to engage with people online. Before being a content creator, I didn't understand that like this can sometimes be like exhausting. And so the fact that you all are willing to do this relentlessly is exactly what society needs. So a big thank you to all of you. And thank you to the viewers who make it to this point. I'm going to put everyone's social media in the description. So make sure that you guys follow, like their content, and also don't forget to subscribe to me as well. But that's all I have for you guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Peace.
Thanks so much. Bye.